It's strange how a single weekend can tilt your entire world sideways, especially when it starts with nothing more than a text that says, "Bro, hot tub night. You in?" I was in, of course. I was always in when it came to Liam. We'd been best friends since sophomore year of college, now 2 years out and still inseparable. Not in a joined at the hip kind of way, but in a quiet, consistent rhythm that made sense. Video game marathons on lazy Saturdays, mutual trash talk, during fantasy football drafts, last-minute road trips just because we could. I told myself it was just friendship, that this magnetic pull I felt toward him was nothing more than history and comfort. But deep down, I'd always known better. The trip had been his idea, a weekend at his cousin's cabin up in the mountains. Just the two of us. "Detox from city noise," he'd said, "and the hot tub is begging for abuse." So here we were. The cabin sat against a slope of pine trees, thick and tall, the late afternoon sun slipping between branches in golden beams. It smelled like wood smoke and cold mountain air. Inside, the place was all creaky floors, stone walls, and oversized flannel blankets. Cozy, isolated, perfect. Liam dropped his duffel on the floor and looked around with that familiar boyish grin. "Dude, tell me this place isn't a vibe." "It's a vibe," I echoed, trying to keep my voice even, trying not to stare too long at the way his sweatshirt pulled snug across his shoulders or how his fingers brushed the back of his neck as he yawned. He shot me a look, eyebrows raised in mock offense. "That's it? No poetic praise for booking the ultimate bromantic getaway? Didn't realize this was a honeymoon?" I smirked, but my chest tightened the second the word left my mouth. Liam laughed, oblivious, or maybe not. "You're just mad because I called dibs on the bigger room." As we unpacked and made our way through the evening, snacks, Spotify playlists, half-assembled board games, I found myself watching him more than I should have. Noticing things I'd trained myself to ignore. The curve of his jaw when he laughed, the way his eyes crinkled when he was genuinely amused, the quiet kindness in his every gesture. I wasn't sure what this weekend was going to do to me, but something in the air told me. Everything was about to change. Liam and I had met in the most unromantic way possible. He spilled a beer on me at a college party and handed me a paper towel, like that would fix everything. I was the quiet transfer, student who hated crowds. He was the golden retriever of a guy who knew everyone and somehow made everyone feel like they belonged. "You looked like you were about to explode from social anxiety," he told me later. "Figured I'd either ruin your shirt or your night. One felt easier to fix." That kind of summed him up, blunt, annoying, but weirdly thoughtful. And against every expectation, we just clicked. He brought chaos into my carefully organized world, and I balanced him out with logic and dry humor. Our friendship felt easy in the beginning, but underneath the sarcasm and mock insults was something steadier. Safer. That safety made it dangerous. 2. We'd spent late nights cramming for finals on his futon, watching dumb conspiracy documentaries, or walking aimlessly around campus when neither of us wanted to sleep. I could talk to him about anything, my family, my doubts, my dreams, except the one thing that terrified me: how I felt about him. Now, watching him move around the cabin kitchen, cracking eggs into a pan like we'd done this 100 times, it hit me how much time had passed, and how little the feelings had. "So," he said, sliding me a mug of coffee with that smug glint in his eye, "ready to lose again at Uno tonight?" I snorted. "You cheated last time?" "Strategized," he corrected, flipping a pancake. "There's a difference. That's what cheaters say. You're just bitter because I Uno reversed you emotionally and in the game." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help the grin tugging at my lips. We always joked like this, half teasing, half flirting. Or maybe that last part was just me, hearing what I wanted to hear. After breakfast, we unpacked more stuff, including our sleeping gear. That's when the first complication hit. Wait, there's only one sleeping bag? I asked, holding up the thick navy blue cocoon of fabric. Liam frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. Damn. Thought I packed both. Must have grabbed just yours. He paused, then shrugged. We can unzip it and use it like a blanket. Or I can freeze on the couch like a noble idiot. I opened my mouth to say I'd take the couch. Of course. I would, but he gave me that disarming smile again like it was no big deal. We've shared worse, he added casually. Remember that night in the back seat of my Civic during the Colorado trip? I did. Too well. I'd lain awake for hours then, hyper-aware of the way his leg pressed against mine, the warmth of his breath near my neck. Yeah, I said lightly. You snore. I breathe, like a congested bear. He chuckled, tossing a throw pillow at me. I ducked it, laughing, but the moment hung there, just a little too long. His eyes caught mine and didn't move. For a second, everything went still. The playful mask slipped, and I saw something. Curiosity? Doubt? Flash across his face. Then he blinked, looked away. We'll figure it out later, he said, his voice easy again, but his fingers lingered just a moment too long on the edge of the sleeping bag. Later that afternoon, we hiked the trail behind the cabin, cameras in hand. Photography had always been our shared thing, me chasing shadows and composition, him obsessed with weird angles and sun flares. We didn't talk much while shooting, but there was a comfort in the quiet, the way we drifted toward each other, naturally, like magnets that didn't need explaining. At one point, I stopped to snap a photo of the ridge, golden light bleeding into the valley below. Liam came up beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. Still got that eye, he said softly. I miss this. Yeah, I replied. Me too. The wind kicked up, and I caught the scent of his cologne. Woodsy, warm, familiar. I turned. To say something. Anything. But he was already looking at me, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. And again, neither of us said a word. We just stood there, too close, pretending it was nothing. But my heart didn't buy it. By the time the sun dropped behind the tree line, the temperature had dipped enough to make my breath fog up in the air. The cabin's heater sputtered, groaned, and then gave up entirely with a pitiful clank. Liam kicked it gently, then harder. Well, that's not ideal. Nope, I muttered, hands shoved deep in my hoodie sleeves. The cold was creeping in fast. Guess it's going to be one of those nights where we see who freezes first. He smirked, but I caught the way his fingers rubbed his upper arms, trying to stay warm. I checked my phone. No signal. Not that it would help. We were miles from anything, and his cousin's mountain paradise didn't come with emergency contacts. Liam walked over to the fireplace, poking around at the logs. I can get a fire going, but we'll have to crash in the living room. Heat won't circulate otherwise. I nodded, already anticipating the awkward conversation to come. One sleeping bag, one couch, no heat, no backup plan. He flicked on a few candles, the light flickering over his features, and something about the quiet intimacy of it all made my skin buzz. This wasn't some friend's dorm room or a crowded party. This was just us, alone in a cabin, miles away from everything we knew. And suddenly I wasn't sure what to do with the pounding in my chest. We spread the sleeping bag on the floor in front of the fireplace. He tossed down extra blankets and a couple of pillows, then stepped back, hands on his hips. It's cozy, kinda romantic, honestly. He was joking, of course. He always was. But the word romantic landed like a thunderclap. I gave a nervous laugh and crouched down to adjust the blanket. If you start playing acoustic guitar, I'm leaving, he grinned. You'd never survive the cold without me. And that was the truth. Not just tonight, but maybe always. He didn't know it, but I'd been orbiting him for years, warmed by his light, burned by it too. We lay side by side, facing the fire. Our arms brushed occasionally under the covers, just enough to make my skin ache. I focused on the flames, the sound of crackling wood, the rhythm of his breathing. "You, okay?" he asked suddenly, voice soft. "Yeah, just thinking." He shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look at me. The firelight danced in his eyes. "About what?" I hesitated. "You. Us. This weird tension I've been dragging around for years like a damn secret I'm too scared to say out loud." "Nothing. Important," I lied, and his eyes lingered on me like he didn't believe me but didn't want to push. "You've been quiet today," he murmured. "I've just had a lot on my mind." He didn't move, just kept watching me. "Is it the sleeping bag? I can take the couch." No, that's not it." My voice cracked slightly, and I hated how transparent I sounded. His brows pulled together, and before I could say anything else, he reached out and tugged the blanket higher over us both. His fingers grazed my wrist, barely a touch, but it sent a jolt straight through me. "It's fine," he said quietly. "We're just keeping warm." Just keeping warm. I closed my eyes. God, why did that feel like a lie? He laid back down, closer now, our shoulders pressed together beneath the covers. His warmth bled into me. I could smell the faint scent of pine in his hair and the familiar laundry detergent on his hoodie. I swallowed hard, willing my heartbeat to slow. "I missed this," he said after a long pause. "Us, hanging out without the noise." "Yeah," I said hoarsely. "Me too." He turned his head toward me. "You ever think about how different things might have been if we didn't meet when we did?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" He exhaled, lips parting like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. Then he laughed softly and shook his head. "Never mind. Just being nostalgic." But his voice had shifted, lower, quieter. There was something in it, something that made my chest twist. I turned toward him slowly, and for a second, we just stared at each other, neither of us smiling, just breathing. His gaze dropped to my lips, then flicked back up. So fast I could have imagined it, or maybe I didn't. I was suddenly very aware of every place our bodies touched under the sleeping bag. The accidental intimacy of sharing such small space. The softness in his voice that didn't feel accidental at all. My mind screamed 1,000 things at once. Say something. Don't ruin this. Don't lose him. But what if he feels the same? Instead, I whispered, "You ever wonder if we missed something?" The air thickened between us. His eyes met mine again, open, uncertain, intense. "Yeah," he said, barely audible. "I do." We didn't move. Not yet. But something had shifted, palpable and irreversible. A silence settled over us, no longer awkward but electric. Words were failing, but they didn't matter anymore. Everything was being said in the space between our bodies, in the way his hand didn't pull away when it brushed mine again, in the way he didn't break eye contact until the fire died to embers. That night, I lay awake, hyper-aware of the warmth beside me. He hadn't said anything more, but neither had I, and yet nothing felt the same. The fire had burned low, casting only the faintest flickers of light across the living room. Shadows danced on the cabin walls, and the air was thick, not just with leftover warmth, but with all the words neither of us had dared to say. I'd spent the better part of the night lying still beside Liam, every inch of my body aware of his. The rise and fall of his chest, the brush of his knee against mine, the subtle heat that passed between us like a slow burn that refused to die down. Sleep wouldn't come. It didn't stand a chance. Not with the weight of everything pressing against my chest like a secret trying to claw its way out. I shifted slightly, careful not to wake him. But apparently he hadn't been sleeping either. "You still up?" he murmured, voice raspy from the quiet. I hesitated. "Yeah, thought so." He exhaled slowly. You've been breathing like someone fighting demons. I smiled despite the ache in my throat. Something like that? He rolled over onto his side to face me, head propped up on one arm. In the low light, I could barely make out his expression, but I felt the way his gaze landed on me. You want to talk about it? He asked, voice gentle. Or should I pretend you're just really passionate about firewood? I laughed softly, but the sound died in my chest. God, this was it. The moment I'd both craved and feared for years. Liam, I said slowly, testing, the weight of his name on my tongue. Do you ever feel like you're standing on the edge of something? And you're terrified to jump because everything might change, even if it's been changing already? He was quiet for a second. Then, yeah, I think I know exactly what that feels like. His voice was lower now, more serious. I turned on my side to face him fully. My heart pounded so loud it was all I could hear. I've been trying not to say something for a long time, I whispered, because I didn't want to mess up what we have. I didn't want you to look at me differently. His brow furrowed, slightly. What are you talking about? I swallowed. Us, this, you and me. A long pause. You and me what? He asked, and there was something raw in his voice. Not cluelessness, not confusion, just fear, like he already knew, and was daring me to say it out loud. I think I've been in love with you for a while now, I said, the words trembling in my throat. And I've tried to ignore it, to push it down. But being here, with you, sleeping next to you, feeling you there all night, it's driving me insane, and I can't pretend it doesn't mean something anymore. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. I instantly regretted everything. My chest squeezed tight as I looked at him, barely able to breathe. His eyes were wide, unreadable in the dim firelight. My mouth opened to backpedal, to say forget it. Forget I said anything, let's pretend this didn't happen, but he moved before I could. Liam sat up, running a hand through his hair. His fingers trembled. Jesus, he muttered. I sat up, too, panic rising. I'm sorry, that was too much. I shouldn't have said. No, he cut in, sharp but not angry. Don't apologize. I stared at him, heart in my throat. He turned toward me slowly, eyes searching mine. I'm not freaking out because I don't feel the same. I'm freaking out because I do, and I've been trying to pretend I didn't. For so long, man. My breath caught. I didn't want to risk it either, he continued, his voice breaking a little. You're the best thing in my life, and I've been walking on eggshells trying not to ruin it. Every time you smiled at me like I mattered, every time you stayed up late just to talk, every time you looked at me like... He stopped himself, then shook his head. It drove me crazy. He laughed bitterly. I thought I was being slick, subtle. I thought I was the only one hiding something. The rush of relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed into it. So I wasn't crazy. No, he said, softer now. You weren't crazy. We sat there for a moment in stunned silence. The fire cracked faintly behind us, the last ember, glowing like a heartbeat. Then he reached for my hand. It was slow, careful, like he was asking permission with every movement. Our fingers met, and the touch was so gentle it undid me completely. I blinked, eyes stinging with emotion I didn't even know how to name. His hand squeezed mine. You don't know how many times I wanted to say it, he said. Like that night we crashed in my car. Or your birthday. Or after your dad got sick. When you called me crying and I just wanted to hold you and say I've got you. In every way. I remember all of those, I whispered. He looked at me. Really looked. Then you get it, don't you? I wasn't just being your friend. I was falling for you the whole time. I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. Can I? He started, and then stopped, his voice trailing into the dark. I nodded again. He leaned in, slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. I couldn't. When his lips finally met mine, it wasn't fireworks or explosions. It was something quieter, deeper, like exhaling after holding your breath for years. Like home. His kiss was soft, tentative at first, then a little firmer, like he was letting himself believe it was real. His hand found my jaw, fingers trembling slightly as they held me there, and I kissed him back with everything I'd kept buried inside. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested, gently against mine. We were still breathing in the same rhythm, still holding on like the world might tilt and take this away if we let go. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Me too," he said. "But I want this," I added quickly. "Whatever it is, whatever it becomes." His thumb brushed my cheek. "Then we'll figure it out, together." Outside, the wind rattled the trees. But in the quiet of the cabin, something inside me had finally stilled. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and pulled me against him, our bodies settling under the blanket again. But this time, there was no space between us. No pretending. No lies, just us. Liam pressed a kiss to the side of my head and whispered, "I'm really glad you said something." I smiled into his chest. "Me too." And as we lay there tangled together, heartbeats slow and steady, I knew this wasn't the end of something. It was just the beginning. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel the morning after we finally admitted everything, but waking up wrapped in Liam's arms felt natural, not explosive or dramatic, just warm, like I'd come home after a long, exhausting journey. Sunlight filtered through the fogged cabin windows, catching dust motes that hovered above us like glitter in slow motion. His fingers were still laced loosely through mine, our hands resting on the space between us that wasn't really a space anymore. For a moment, I just watched him breathe, his lips slightly parted, his hair a mess, the faintest smile ghosting his face. It hit me all over again that this was real, not some half-hoped daydream. He was here, with me. And then he stirred. "I can feel your eyes boring into my soul," Liam mumbled without opening his eyes. I snorted. "Don't flatter. Yourself. I was counting your nose hairs." He cracked one eye open, amused. "Romantic," I try. He shifted, his body sliding closer until our knees touched. "So, we're doing this." "We are," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. There was a beat of silence, and then his hand moved, hesitant at first, brushing against my jaw before settling there, thumb gently stroking my cheek. "You look different today," he said softly. "Because I'm in love with my best friend?" He blinked, eyes softening. "Yeah, that'll do it." We lay there for a while, limbs tangled and hearts exposed, talking like we hadn't in years. Deeper this time, less guarded. He told me how long he'd been fighting his feelings, how he convinced himself it wasn't worth the risk. I told him about the moments I almost said something but got scared, convinced I'd misread him. "It's kind of stupid, isn't it?" I said, tracing a small circle on his chest with my finger. "How we both wasted so much time." Liam caught my hand, lacing our fingers again. "Not wasted, just delayed." I smiled. "You always were the optimistic one." Someone had to be. Eventually, we made our way out of bed and into the kitchen, still orbiting each other like we were learning a new language through touch. His hand brushed mine when we reached for the same mug, and instead of pulling away like I might have before, I let our fingers linger. He noticed and smiled. It wasn't just the physical closeness that had shifted. It was the way he looked at me now, the ease in his voice, the quiet comfort in our silences. It was in the way he asked, "Want coffee?" but meant "I want to take care of you." Over coffee and leftover chips from last night, we talked about the now what. "I mean, do we tell people?" I asked. Liam tilted his head. "Eventually. But right now, I kind of want this to be ours for a bit, you know? Yeah, I agreed. I want to live in this moment a little longer before letting the world in. We'll get questions, he said. Some weird reactions, maybe. I don't care. I looked up at him. Not if I get to have this, have you? He smiled like I'd just told him the secret to the universe. You have me? He said simply. You always did, even when I was too scared to admit it. That hit me harder than I expected. I stood and walked over to him, resting my forehead against his. We'll figure it out. He nodded, wrapping his arms around my waist. One day at a time. We stood like that for a while, swaying gently in the middle of the kitchen like there was music only we could hear. The mess from breakfast didn't matter. The outside world didn't matter. Only us. Only this. And somewhere deep in my chest, I felt it settle. A quiet certainty. This was just the beginning. 3 days later, we were back in the city, but everything looked different, because everything was different. The sidewalks felt less crowded, the buildings less cold. The noise didn't feel so loud anymore, not with Liam beside me. We were walking through the Sunday market, weaving between fruit stands and flower stalls, hands brushing every so often like we were still testing this new closeness. Still learning, the rhythm of each other outside the safe bubble of the cabin. And then, without overthinking it, I reached down and took his hand. He looked at me, surprised for only a heartbeat, before his fingers tightened around mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. That one small act felt huge, public, honest, real, and he smiled. That smile, like I'd just handed him the sky. We kept walking, fingers intertwined, the way we never had before. He held me a little closer when someone brushed past, like he was quietly claiming me, and I let him. Near the end of the row, we passed a small stand selling old books. Liam stopped, distracted by a stack of weathered hardcovers. I followed his gaze, but he was already flipping one open, an old edition of Leaves of Grass. He turned to me. Walt Whitman. Didn't we butcher his poetry in Mr. Beale's class? You butchered it. I just silently judged you. He chuckled, holding the book up. Should we get it? For irony's sake? For irony. And sentimentality, I said, nudging his shoulder. He bought it, slid it into his tote bag like it was precious cargo. I knew he would probably scribble something inside the cover later. He always did that with books that meant something. I didn't ask what he'd write. I figured one day he'd show me when it mattered most. We grabbed coffees from the corner cafe and sat on a bench overlooking the park. The winter chill still hung in the air, but he pulled my hand into his lap and rubbed his thumb over my knuckles like he didn't even notice the cold. Hey, he said quietly. Can I ask you something? Yeah? His eyes were softer than usual, almost shy. Do you ever think about what this looks like 6 months from now? I hesitated. Not because I hadn't thought about it, but because I'd thought about it too much. About how it could all go right. Or how easily fear might pull one of us back into the shadows. But I looked at him, really looked at him, and all I saw was someone who'd chosen me. Not out of impulse, but out of truth. I do, I said. All the time. He waited. I think we'll still be doing dumb things like this. Sunday markets, bad coffee, bookstore dates that end with you reading me Whitman in your worst dramatic voice. He grinned. And I think, I added, we'll still be figuring stuff out. Still learning how to talk when things get hard. Still scared sometimes, but choosing each other anyway. He leaned in, pressing a kiss to my cheek. That sounds pretty perfect. It won't be. I know, he said, but it'll be ours. That stuck with me. Ours. This strange, beautiful thing we'd built from years of friendship, stretched and reshaped into something deeper, something more, something real. As the sun dipped lower behind the buildings, Liam tugged me closer, resting his head on my shoulder like he had that night in the hot tub. But this time, there was no tension, no fear, just comfort, just us. He looked up at me with a smirk. "Still scared?" "Terrified," I said honestly. "But I think that's okay." He nodded. "Me too." And then he held up his pinky. "Promise we figure it out together?" I looked at his hand, at this ridiculous and sincere gesture, and hooked my pinky around his. Promise. We didn't need fanfare or grand declarations. Just this, two people choosing each other day by day, and as we sat there, pinkies linked, hearts open, and the world quietly spinning around us, I knew. This wasn't the end. This was where it all began.